This is Unforgettable Learning, where we talk to L&D visionaries, experts, and mavericks about performance, creativity, and tech. Subscribe to stay in touch. Today's learning ecosystems involve complex and integrated technologies like platforms for talent management, training deployment and data storage, tools for social learning, resource distribution, collaborative working, immersive learning, and content creation. And new technologies are emerging all the time, like HR chatbots, skills technologies, and co-pilots. It can feel like we're up against it, trying to balance everything with new and existing technologies coming together. And when we want to adopt new technologies and stay ahead of the curve, we may experience setbacks with our legacy systems and, of course, ways of thinking. In this two-part series, I'm delighted to be joined with Egle Vinauskaite, Director of Learning Innovation Consultancy Nodes. And we're going to discuss the role of tech in learning and how, when and why to assess and adopt new technologies. Hi, Egle. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Kate. Thank you.
It's so nice to see you. And listen, can you please correct my pronunciation one more time? Because I'm fairly sure I did not get your surname correct. So give us an intro.
Egle Vinauskaite.
Okay, sounds much better when you say it. I guess you've grown up with it, so you've had more practice. And Josh is here too. And Josh, welcome.
That was a great intro, Kate. I was so impressed by that intro that I'm convinced that it was created by AI, but maybe we'll get into that later.
Gosh,
was that pure 100% human effort?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Do you feel let down slightly that I actually didn't use the tool to create something?
I was wondering whether the compliment is better served as saying it was AI supported or whether it was 100% human.
It was 100% human, I can tell you, with all honesty.
Pat on the back. Pat on the back.
Well, we're really quite interested in chatting with you today, Egle, on what we can do in L&D and what we're trying to achieve with the technologies that we're adopting. And I guess I first wanted to open this up by asking, what is it that you see in your work that L&D are trying to achieve broadly with tech in learning, especially given, this whole kind of speed of change that we see just all the time, and frankly have done for the longest time as well over the last 20 years. But yeah, what are L&D trying to do with all this tech?
I mean, there are a lot of things that our L&D colleagues are trying to achieve with technology. I think broadly speaking, technology is used either to gain efficiencies or to scale. So I think these are the big two buckets. And I think in either case, it's used to varying degrees of success.
Yeah. And what do you think about this situation that we find ourselves in with legacy tech? And how do you see organizations coping with that challenge?
With legacy tech, what do you mean exactly?
I guess when I meet clients, they tend to have between 3 and 20 different LMS systems that go back various lengths of time when they were implemented. And, if you're working with big global companies, there's often a lot of things that they've tried and they've adopted over the last 15, 20 years. And it's starting to become a challenge because there's so much of it. Different people don't, in different groups and areas of the organization are going to different places to access things. Yeah, I just wonder if you've experienced that and you've seen that and whether you're seeing that, as an issue.
Yeah, so it depends on the size of the organization. Some organizations have the opposite problem, that they are trying to integrate their first pieces of technology, especially if they're fast-growing organizations. Then they have finally reached the size of the L&D team where they feel like, okay, we can do something with this and start creating these career paths and L&D and supporting people in their jobs. So it depends on the size of the organization, really. Yeah, but I do think that there is one overarching challenge, which is that it often seems that people put technology first, rather problem first, instead of asking what are we trying to achieve here. So that's obviously one problem which we're going to have to dive deep into, because AI is one of these technologies as well, and it's going to, I'm sure, become a bit of probably a piece of legacy tech even in a few years. Thinking about like we integrated this technology, we adopted it, and now the rest of the world has moved on. What do we do with this? Because now we're kind of stuck with it because the degree of integration that AI requires. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, in a lot of cases, there is also a lack of, I guess, especially when it comes to very complex systems like LMSs, LXPs. I don't think I've seen anyone feel elated about their new platform. It seems like every complex platform is a compromise. And that's the thing, that when you're not quite sure what you're trying to achieve, or even if you know what you're trying to achieve, because you're trying to achieve so many things for good reasons, in very big complex enterprise level organizations, and then you're compromising on the functionality in some ways, and then probably you're also compromising on the UX as well. And it just you layer these things on top of each other, and then we end up in the situation.
I can already feel Josh wants to come in, because I know you're going to have an opinion on people not feeling elated with their technology. Josh, what do you reckon?
I think it's a tale as old as time, people's relationship with their learning tech, right? But I think if you bring up a great point, you said, we have a tech first mindset rather than a problem first mindset. Obviously, speaking of organizations in broad strokes and speaking of tech in broad strokes is a bit of a dangerous game. But in your opinion, what are organizations really trying to solve? What is really the problem, and why do they see technology as the sort of silver bullet to help them get there? Because in my experience, part of the frustration of a technology first attitude is that there's almost, and certainly in conversations I have, with clients, certainly early on, is that they almost have this feeling of they have to have this platform, this technology to help them solve it. But what's the root cause? What's the root problem? And, feel free to draw on just a specific single example of an organization, but I wonder about that sort of chicken and egg relationship between, well, I can't stand my technology because it's not solving my problems, but is your technology creating your problems or solving your problems?
Oh my Josh, that's a very complex question. I definitely agree with your point that in some cases it feels like people are buying these technologies just to have them, because it feels like if you have them, they're going to do something that needs to be done in L&D, almost like you are a real functioning L&D function if you have this piece of technology. Definitely there is that. And there may also be a situation where, we can go into perhaps the skills and the backgrounds of people working in L&D, or things like perhaps short-term thinking in a way that, okay, so I need to solve this problem that's right in front of me. So some efficiency problem that I've been experiencing for the last half a year, but I'm not thinking about what I'm going to need in the next 3 years or 5 years, and sort of not doing it in a strategic way. In terms of, the underlying problem that people are trying to solve. There's I don't know if I have a good answer that would kind of just pinpoint the problem, but I remember speaking with someone, and he said that people decided that content is sort of the answer, and they started creating in L&D, transitioning from in-person training to digital learning. They started creating a lot of content, and now a lot of technology is solving content problems, not performance problems. So that's one of the answers, I guess. But again, I don't want to be too harsh on the industry, because I feel like we also have a lot of navel gazing in a sort of a negative way, thinking that like we don't know what we're doing, and people just don't have the qualification or experience to do the right things. I think that it is just a function of many things, and it's I'm sure very different in different organizations.
I think what you just mentioned kind of comes back to Kate's question about our relationship with legacy tech specifically, because it is, and I tend to agree with you. It's sort of, it's easy to dwell on the negative or the lack of strategic thinking, but I think there's a maturity that's coming on top of it from how we're breaking out of that legacy mold, because there was a certain point in time where the attitude in organizations towards the role of L&D was, it's a content center, it's an activity center, and to really pivot towards solving performance problems or behavioral gaps or skill gaps is quite a jump. And I think our technology and our content to a certain degree, or just in general, the types of things we put in front of our people is starting to shift a bit more as we're starting to rethink the role of L&D in service of businesses' goals.
Yeah, I would agree with you here. Yes, but I don't know how to generalize the scale of that happening. I don't know, because I think that both at conferences and on LinkedIn and in conversations that we're having, I don't know if that's a representative sample. So it's hard to say if the industry as a whole is moving in that direction.
One of the things that I've been hearing more kind of groundswell around is the sort of shift from L&D being this like content center, if you like, to a growth function, and just sort of shifting the language, shifting the sort of self-identity, I guess, of what we're up to, and the difference between, I don't know, it's just almost like we're always trying to refresh and regenerate, but that feels healthy to me, this idea that we have certain skills in L&D that can help and support people to grow, to get new skills, to gain promotions, to take mastery, to own their own career paths. And we've always sort of had that, but partly maybe I think some of the tech, exactly to your point about, we grew content and then we had to have a system to distribute content and then the system to check the content had been completed and, all of those sort of ancillary functions. Maybe if we're changing our own notion of ourselves and what we do, we can be a bit more fluid and flexible perhaps about the types of technologies that we're able to adopt and let go of. And I'm kind of curious about, have you seen also this sort of shift towards this identity shift, I guess, towards a growth center, a growth function, and away from kind of classical sort of training and content delivery function?
I mean, definitely. And generally thinking L&D is, when you think about your career choice, L&D is a kind of career that's quite easy to justify why you're inspired to do it, because you're supporting other people in their careers, in their growth, and in achieving what they want to achieve in their lives. So I think that's very inspiring, and that's a very meaningful place to be in that kind of role. And I do think that even the conversations that we are having right now and everywhere in the industry, they all stem from that same place of we want to do the best job possible in supporting the employees that we are serving. So I think even if that's not immediately achievable, or if that's a process that takes a while to happen, to actually shift from we are creating training to, and that's the thing, like some training at the right place in the right format, that is also, it's not a bad thing. And then we are moving towards supporting people, performance, organization, careers, and so on. I think the fact that we're having this conversation is a testament to the industry having the intention to move in that direction.
Something I wanted to get your opinion on is Meta recently said Workplace is going to be pulled completely from June 2026. And so it felt like for a brief moment in our little world of kind of L&D and content and tech, nobody was interested. Then all of a sudden, a few big players got involved. And now it seems like, at least from Meta's perspective, they're sort of pulling back. And I wondered whether you had any thoughts on that, whether you knew about that, and whether you see any trends about like big tech organizations getting involved in the world of L&D or not, as the case now is.
Yeah, I think with Meta and Workplace, I think it's less of L&D not being a big enough industry and more about them just shifting a lot of resources to AI and metaverses.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think it's just good in their case. It's just good product thinking to prioritize, because they haven't dominated that market. They had a lot of, or at least a significant number of organizations that were absolute champions of their product, but they haven't done anything with it. So I think they decided to just remove themselves from there.
Let me ask you one other question then, that is something that I love thinking about. Emerging technologies. And I know in our second sort of part of this episode, we're going to talk about a bit more AI. But for now, just in general, are we an industry that tends to kind of pick up and get quite excited by the trends of technologies, possibly? Or are we getting something right here with emerging technologies, or are we getting something wrong? What's your opinion on that?
Oh, yeah. So I definitely think that as an industry, we do tend to jump on latest tech trends. And this is something that I have several opinions on. But I also like to think that perhaps it's not just L&D. It's not that we are just this unique industry that we just couldn't help ourselves. We don't know what's happening in other industries either.
That's true.
So yeah, so there's that. But I think that
I blame Steve Jobs.
Why?
Because we got so excited with the release of every new iPhone when it first came out, that this obsession with new and novel in the tech new digital age has almost set a precedent, both on sort of a consumer basis, but also a business basis, of like, what's new, exciting in tech. That's not something we spoke about 15 years ago at the level of which we do now. And obviously, coming off the back of Google's AI conferences, of Meta's AI conferences, NVIDIA's AI conferences, like these are almost becoming like fan events to like temples of tech consumerism and stuff like that. That I think it's got a trickle down effect even in this little part of the world of L&D. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually think that in this case, it's not necessarily Steve Jobs, in my opinion. It was him coinciding with going into macroeconomic factors, low interest rates, and the rise of VC, which started promoting investments in startups and technology companies, which is why we have so many of them.
Although, interestingly, none of this got us into camping, did it? Because when we were staying overnight, waiting for the Apple doors to fly open so we could get the next iPhone, I definitely don't see anybody talking about the camping side of things. I'd love it if that was the case. I got into camping because the iPhone. What? Anyway.
But going back to the question about us being susceptible to tech trends, I think there are a few things happening here, and a lot of things come together. So let me weave a thread here. So you cannot improve something unless you know how it works, or at least you're curious about how it works. So the classic, very simple example is moving from classroom lectures to e-learning, which usually ends up with very low engagement. And since we don't interrogate either why classroom lectures work or don't work and in what context and everything around that, why people want or don't want to attend them and whether they learn or not, and we don't interrogate how e-learning works, we end up in a situation where we are again trying to solve problems with that transition. So do we add gamification? Do we chop it into smaller courses? Do we try to make video? So again, solving content problems, right? Instead of getting curious about what we're trying to do here, and layer on top the fact that there's no formal career path into L&D, and there's no agreed on foundational knowledge, which means that there are people coming into L&D that don't have this foundation and how learning works, how organizational learning works specifically. We look at some of the most in-demand skills in various reports. They are internal communications, they are data literacy. If you don't have these skills, then a lot of your education happens through vendors' pitches and through marketing materials. And then they can say that, doing something via video increases retention by that many %, or if we're going to start sending you email nudges, that is exactly what behavioral science says that is going to increase your engagement by 100%. So if you do not have an objective, informed, independent opinion about a new piece of technology, then it is you put yourself in a situation where it's very easy for you to get swayed by everything around you. Obviously, on the other side, on the vendor side, there are a lot of incentives for them to present what they're selling in a way that would catch your attention. So sort of it's a bit of a situation. And then to Josh's earlier point about product mindset, which is about deeply understanding what the user needs are and then creating something specifically for the person, as opposed to the content-first approach that L&D often leads with, which is starting with what people need to learn and then trying to find the most palatable way for them to learn it. And I think there is that mindset gap, I would say, because in L&D, probably in a lot of corporate functions, you do not develop that kind of product mindset, little spidey sense. So where we end up is that if you don't have curiosity about the problem you're solving, and if you don't have the foundational knowledge to critically assess potential solutions, how can you not be swayed by tech trends? So
that's such a fascinating point, because it's almost sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in its own right, of you're trying to, and I really kind of empathize with the L&D leader that comes from, and we all know that we fall into this industry. No one grows up and decides I'm going to be an L&D leader per se, but they have certain passions that attract them to what it needs to be done. But then with that also comes skill strengths and potentially skill gaps in how you need to approach it. Some are strong business leaders. Some have that really strong learning, teaching background that can give them back up to it. And the combination of those skills that are required to help you make an informed decision on, this is my problem and this is how content or technology or X may or may not solve my problem. That's hard to navigate, right? That's really difficult to navigate when you think about the many hats that we have to wear as leaders and how we have to meaningfully think about our problems. Also knowing, of course, that L&D doesn't exist in a silo within your organization. Being able to partner cross-functionally within your organization is a skill set, as an example. And so I think that's just a great point to just kind of talk about why it's easy to be swayed by technology, because there are features that are designed to try and solve the problems that we think we need or have. And obviously the tech is doing something right. Otherwise, this industry wouldn't exist as a whole. But the nuances of it, I think, is where things get quite difficult because of the skill strengths that you bring to the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, there is this question of company culture. Because if you want to create something that addresses a specific need, and you want to deeply understand what it is and find the best solution, what that implies is that there is an upfront cost to actually research, spend time not building anything, but understanding something. And then there is the other cost of iterative development. It's not that I'm going to pay you money, you ship this thing. It is doing something over time iteratively. There's no immediate endpoint to a project, to a product, to a technology. So I think you also need to develop your comfort with that being the case. And to the culture point, at Learning Technologies this year, David Kelly actually said this amazing quote that you can only have the kind of learning technology that your company culture allows, pretty much, which I thought was yes, that's apt. That's apt.
A great one.
That is interesting. And so we're going to get to the end of time in this session, but I was just going to ask, Egle, could you give us some tips then for people who are looking at emerging technologies, all of the kind of tech landscape now, what would you say to them to kind of think of first? I think I know what you're going to say, but speaking to your kind of curiosity and problem that you're trying to solve. But yeah, what tips would you give people adopting new technologies in L&D?
So this is very much a summary of what I just said. One is really understand what problem you're solving. And specifically what that means is speak to the people who have that problem, not their, for example, managers, which is it's a good indication, but you actually want to speak to the person who will be using whatever service product you'll be deploying, and gain empathy, and only then go onto the exhibition floor and start surfing all the technologies. So this is, I think, the singular thing that you can do for yourself to remove the overwhelm and be able to stay objective and be able to create these, to form an independent opinion about whether a certain piece of technology is something that you need and if it's going to work in your specific context.
And to your point in the beginning about finding elation with your technology, you'll be a little bit closer to that if you do that.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for that. And we'll be back with you in our next episode shortly.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to stay up to date with leading lights from L&D and leave us a review to let us know what you think.